The easiest person to disrespect is often the one who knows the most about you. Every weekday morning before the sun painted the glass towers of downtown Chicago with streaks of gold, a quiet security guard unlocked the front entrance of Brooks Holdings. Employees hurried past him carrying expensive coffee, polished briefcases, and ambitious dreams. Some nodded politely without slowing down. Most never looked up at all. To them, he was simply another uniform standing beside the revolving doors. His name tag read Nathan Brooks. Few people noticed it. Even fewer cared. Dressed in a neatly pressed Navy security uniform, Nathan greeted every employee with the same calm smile. "Good morning. I hope you have a wonderful day." The words never changed, even when they were ignored. He quietly held the elevator for late arrivals, helped visitors find conference rooms, and picked up forgotten umbrellas after afternoon storms. He moved through the building with patient confidence, as though nothing anyone said or failed to say could disturb his peace. What nobody realized was that Nathan paid closer attention than anyone else inside the company. He noticed who thanked the janitorial staff after freshly cleaned hallways. He noticed which managers remembered interns by name. He noticed who smiled only when executives walked by and who treated everyone with equal respect. Every ordinary morning quietly revealed extraordinary truths about the people working inside the building. At exactly 8:15, a sleek black luxury sedan stopped in front of the entrance. Olivia Carter stepped out wearing an elegant charcoal business suit, carrying a leather portfolio beneath one arm while speaking through a wireless headset. As regional operations director, she managed hundreds of employees across several states and expected everything around her to operate with flawless precision. Without looking toward Nathan, she extended her empty coffee cup toward him as if the gesture required no explanation. "Throw this away," she said while continuing her conversation. Nathan accepted the cup with a gentle smile. "Of course. Have a productive morning." Olivia had already disappeared through the lobby before he finished speaking. A young receptionist standing nearby watched the exchange with visible discomfort, but remained silent. Nathan calmly placed the empty cup into a recycling bin, before returning to his position beside the entrance. Throughout the morning, the pattern repeated itself. A sales manager impatiently demanded directions to a conference room he had visited dozens of times. Another executive blamed Nathan because a visitor had arrived early for a meeting. One employee accidentally dropped several folders across the marble floor without even attempting to gather them. Nathan quietly knelt to help organize the scattered papers, before wishing the embarrassed assistant good luck during her presentation. She thanked him sincerely, becoming the first person that morning to ask his name. "Nathan," he replied warmly. "I hope your meeting goes well." Her grateful smile lingered long after she entered the elevator. High above the lobby, hidden security cameras silently recorded everything. They captured more than movement. They captured choices. They revealed character during moments people assumed nobody important was watching. Nathan glanced briefly toward one of the cameras before returning his attention to the busy entrance. Another employee rushed through the revolving doors without acknowledging him. Nathan simply smiled again. The day had only just begun, and the most revealing moments were still waiting to arrive. The following morning arrived wrapped in a blanket of cold autumn air, and Nathan Brooks stood at his familiar post beside the front entrance before the first employee arrived. He adjusted the collar of his neatly pressed security uniform, greeted the cleaning crew with genuine appreciation, and carried a small notebook inside his jacket pocket. It was never filled with complaints. Instead, each page contained quiet observations about leadership, respect, and the invisible moments that revealed who people truly were when they believed nobody important was watching. One by one, employees streamed into the building. Some offered polite smiles. Others walked past him while reading emails on their phones. Nathan responded to every greeting, or lack of greeting, with the same steady kindness. Shortly after 8 o'clock, a young woman wearing an intern identification badge hesitated near the entrance. She struggled to balance a laptop bag, a notebook, and 2 large presentation boards that nearly slipped from her hands. Before anything fell, Nathan stepped forward and gently steadied the stack. "Looks like an important morning," he said with a warm smile. The young woman laughed nervously. "It is my first presentation, and I think I am more afraid of dropping these boards than speaking in front of everyone." Nathan held the lobby door open while she walked inside. "People rarely remember a perfect presentation," he replied. "They remember honesty, preparation, and confidence. Trust yourself." The intern smiled with visible relief. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." She had taken the time to read his name tag. Nathan quietly wished her good luck before returning to his post. A few minutes later, Olivia Carter entered the lobby surrounded by 2 department managers discussing quarterly performance reports. Without slowing her pace, she glanced toward Nathan. "The conference room on the 18th floor needs fresh bottled water before 9 o'clock, she said. "Take care of it immediately." Nathan answered politely. "Certainly. I will let the facilities team know right away." Olivia frowned slightly. "Do not tell someone else. Handle it yourself." Nathan remained calm. The company has designated staff responsible for conference preparation. They will make sure everything is ready. Olivia sighed impatiently before walking away, shaking her head as though the security guard had somehow disappointed her. Several employees exchanged uncomfortable looks but said nothing. Nathan simply recorded another quiet observation inside his notebook after the lobby became empty again. Throughout the afternoon, he continued watching small interactions unfold across the building. An executive thanked the valet only after realizing another vice president was standing nearby. A supervisor ignored a maintenance technician asking for elevator access because she was busy answering a text message. Meanwhile, the same intern from earlier stopped to thank the janitorial staff for preparing her meeting room before leaving for lunch. Nathan noticed every detail. Near the end of the workday, the intern returned to the lobby carrying the same presentation boards, but this time her smile was unmistakable. "We won the client," she said excitedly. "Your advice helped me stay calm." Nathan congratulated her sincerely. "You earned it." She looked at him with curiosity. "How did you know exactly what I needed to hear?" Nathan smiled gently. "Because everyone entering this building hopes someone believes in them before they have a reason to believe in themselves." She thanked him once more before leaving. High above the lobby, silent security cameras continued recording another ordinary day filled with seemingly insignificant choices. Most people believed those cameras existed only to protect company property. None of them realized they were quietly documenting something far more valuable than lost equipment or unlocked doors. They were capturing the culture of an entire company, one simple human interaction at a time, and Nathan knew that before long, every unnoticed moment would matter more than anyone inside the building could possibly imagine. The rhythm inside Brooks Holdings remained unchanged throughout the rest of the week, but Nathan Brooks understood that routines often revealed more about people than extraordinary circumstances ever could. Every morning the revolving doors welcomed another wave of employees carrying ambitious plans, unfinished conversations, and hurried expectations. Few of them realized they were quietly participating in an evaluation far more important than quarterly reports or sales numbers. Nathan stood beside the entrance with his usual calm smile, greeting everyone with the same warmth regardless of their title. On Thursday morning, the young intern approached the lobby once again, this time carrying only a small notebook and a cup of coffee. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks," she said cheerfully. "I brought an extra coffee, because you always look like you never have time to take a break." Nathan accepted the gesture with genuine gratitude. "That is very thoughtful of you." "Thank you, Emily." Her face brightened immediately. "You remembered my name." Nathan smiled. People deserve to be remembered. Before Emily entered the elevator, she noticed a maintenance technician struggling to move several heavy supply boxes through the lobby. Without hesitation, she placed her own bag on a nearby chair and helped carry the remaining boxes to the service hallway. Nathan quietly observed the scene with quiet satisfaction before writing another brief note inside his small notebook. Character reveals itself when kindness has no audience. Later that morning, Olivia Carter arrived for an executive leadership meeting. The elevators had become temporarily delayed because technicians were completing routine maintenance, and several employees waited patiently near the lobby. Olivia checked her watch repeatedly before looking directly at Nathan. "Why are the elevators still closed?" she demanded. Nathan answered respectfully. "The maintenance team expects them to reopen within 5 minutes. They are completing scheduled safety inspections." Olivia folded her arms with visible frustration. 5 minutes is unacceptable. Tell them executives cannot waste time standing here. Nathan remained composed. Safety inspections protect everyone inside the building. They will be finished very soon. Olivia sighed loudly before walking toward the stairwell without another word. Several employees exchanged uneasy glances, embarrassed by the interaction, but unwilling to say anything. Nathan simply returned to greeting visitors, as though nothing unusual had happened. That afternoon, a delivery driver accidentally arrived with several oversized packages, intended for the executive conference center. The man looked exhausted after carrying heavy equipment across multiple office buildings throughout the city. Before he could ask for assistance, Nathan helped guide the delivery cart through the lobby and held each security door open along the route. Emily happened to witness the interaction while returning from lunch. She smiled quietly before joining them, helping move the final package into the conference room. The grateful driver thanked both of them before continuing his route. From the opposite side of the hallway, Olivia noticed the scene only briefly. She assumed the security guard was simply doing another ordinary task, without realizing he had volunteered to help someone who was not even employed by the company. As evening approached, Nathan completed one final walk through the nearly empty building. He stopped beside a hallway display showcasing the company's mission statement printed across polished glass. Integrity, respect, excellence, innovation. He studied the words silently for several moments, before looking across the office floor where cleaning crews quietly prepared the building for another day. "Beautiful words," one elderly janitor said with a friendly smile. Nathan nodded gently. "The difficult part is making sure they become everyday habits instead of decorations." The janitor laughed softly before returning to work. High above the lobby, silent cameras continued preserving another ordinary day filled with forgotten conversations, unnoticed kindness, quiet impatience, and simple decisions. Nathan closed his notebook after writing one final sentence beneath the day's observations. "The strongest culture is never created inside boardrooms. It is created by the way people treat those who can offer them nothing in return." Somewhere else inside the building, Olivia prepared tomorrow's executive presentation with complete confidence, unaware that the quiet security guard she barely acknowledged had already learned far more about her leadership than any performance review could ever reveal. Friday morning began with unusual energy inside Brooks Holdings. Employees whispered about an unexpected executive meeting that had been added to everyone's calendar late the previous evening. No explanation accompanied the invitation. Department directors, regional managers, and senior executives had all been instructed to attend the gathering the following Monday at exactly 9 o'clock. The subject line contained only 3 words: Leadership Culture Review. Throughout the day, speculation spread from office to office. Some believed a major acquisition was about to be announced. Others expected organizational restructuring after a successful financial quarter. Nobody imagined the meeting had anything to do with the quiet security guards standing patiently beside the front entrance. Nathan Brooks welcomed visitors with the same gentle smile he had worn every morning, never allowing the growing curiosity inside the building to change his routine. Shortly before noon, a catering company arrived to prepare refreshments for an executive client presentation. Several employees hurried through the lobby discussing presentation slides, while contractors moved equipment into the conference center. Amid the organized activity, a young catering assistant accidentally pushed a serving cart over a slightly uneven section of polished flooring. Several trays shifted unexpectedly, sending stacks of neatly folded linen napkins and serving utensils across the hallway. The young assistant froze with embarrassment as conversations around her suddenly stopped. Before she could kneel to gather everything, Nathan calmly walked over and began helping without saying a single critical word. Emily, the intern, immediately joined him. Together they organized every item back onto the cart, while reassuring the visibly nervous assistant that everything would be ready on time. "Thank you," the young woman whispered gratefully. "I thought everyone was going to be angry." Nathan smiled kindly. People deserve help much more often than they deserve judgment. The simple sentence eased the tension almost instantly. At that exact moment, Olivia Carter stepped out of the executive conference room after finishing a strategy discussion. She noticed Nathan helping the catering assistant and frowned with obvious irritation. "Nathan," she called firmly across the hallway. "Why are you wasting time here? Your responsibility is the front entrance, not serving food." The hallway became unusually quiet. Several employees looked toward the security guard, uncertain how he would respond. Nathan stood slowly after placing the final bundle of linen onto the cart. "She needed assistance for a moment," he answered calmly. "The entrance remained covered by another officer while I helped." Olivia crossed her arms. "Your job is to follow instructions, not decide which tasks deserve your attention." Her voice remained controlled, but unmistakably dismissive. The catering assistant lowered her eyes, while Emily shifted uncomfortably beside the serving cart. Nathan simply nodded with quiet respect. "I understand your concern." Olivia looked around at the nearby employees. Professional organizations function because everyone stays within their assigned role. Without waiting for another response, she turned and walked back toward the conference room. Silence lingered for several seconds after she disappeared behind the closed doors. Nathan offered the catering assistant one final reassuring smile before returning to the lobby exactly as though nothing unusual had happened. Emily quietly watched him leave, unable to understand why someone treated with so little respect could continue responding with such remarkable grace. Later that afternoon, Nathan completed another routine inspection through the nearly empty building. He paused briefly inside the security operations room where dozens of monitors displayed every hallway, lobby, conference room entrance, and reception area throughout headquarters. The recording from earlier that afternoon quietly replayed on one screen. Nathan watched the brief interaction only once before saving the footage into a secure review folder labeled Leadership Culture Assessment. He closed the file without emotion, turned off the monitor, and placed his small notebook beside the keyboard. Beneath the final observation of the day, he carefully wrote a single sentence. "Authority reveals itself through decisions. Character reveals itself through compassion." Outside the operations room, the building slowly settled into evening silence. Employees gathered their belongings and headed home believing the week had ended like every other week before it. None of them realized that Monday morning would become the most unforgettable day in the history of Brooks Holdings, because the quiet man they had overlooked for months had already finished learning everything he needed to know about the people entrusted to lead his company. Monday morning arrived beneath a pale autumn sky, and the headquarters of Brooks Holdings carried an unusual stillness that nobody could fully explain. Employees entered the building earlier than usual, speaking in hushed voices as they glanced repeatedly at the notification displayed on their phones. The emergency leadership meeting remained scheduled for exactly 9 o'clock in the executive boardroom on the 35th floor. Attendance was mandatory for every senior manager, regional director, and executive officer. No agenda had been shared. No explanation had followed. Nathan Brooks unlocked the front entrance at precisely 7 o'clock, just as he had every morning for months. His uniform remained perfectly pressed, his polished shoes reflected the morning light, and his familiar smile welcomed everyone who stepped inside. Nothing about his appearance suggested the significance of the day ahead. Emily arrived carrying her notebook, and paused beside him before entering the building. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks," she said warmly. "Everyone seems nervous today." Nathan smiled gently. Sometimes uncertainty gives people an opportunity to discover who they really are. Emily laughed softly. "You always know exactly what to say." Nathan simply wished her good luck before opening the door for another group of employees. A few minutes later, Olivia Carter entered the lobby carrying several presentation folders beneath one arm. Her expression reflected confidence mixed with impatience. She briefly glanced toward Nathan without slowing her pace. "Make sure nobody interrupts the executive meeting this morning," she said firmly. "No deliveries. No visitors. No unnecessary distractions." Nathan nodded respectfully. "Everything will be handled." Olivia continued toward the private elevator reserved for senior leadership, never noticing the quiet certainty behind his calm expression. By 8:45 the executive floor had become unusually active. Members of the board of directors arrived from different cities, accompanied by legal advisors and corporate officers rarely seen inside headquarters. Several executives exchanged puzzled looks as unfamiliar board members greeted one another with serious expressions. Olivia assumed the meeting involved a major acquisition or leadership restructuring. She reviewed her financial reports one final time while waiting outside the boardroom. Inside the Security Operations Center on the first floor, Nathan quietly removed a small access card from his wallet. It looked different from every identification badge issued to ordinary employees. Instead of a department title, it carried a simple inscription beneath his name: Founder and Chairman. He studied the card for only a moment before placing it back inside his wallet. Then he carefully folded his security jacket across the back of a chair, revealing a perfectly tailored charcoal business suit that had remained hidden beneath the uniform throughout the morning. He adjusted his tie, picked up the familiar leather notebook he had carried every day, and looked once around the security office that had quietly become his workplace during the past several months. Every hallway camera, every observation, every conversation had prepared him for this moment. Without hurry, Nathan stepped into a private elevator accessible only through executive authorization. The doors closed silently behind him. 35 floors above, board members had already taken their seats around the polished conference table. Olivia noticed several directors repeatedly checking the hallway, as though they were waiting for someone important. At exactly 9 o'clock the room became completely silent. The conference room doors opened slowly. Every person instinctively turned toward the entrance. Olivia expected to see an unfamiliar corporate investor, or perhaps the chief executive officer returning unexpectedly from overseas. Instead, the man who entered carried the same calm expression everyone had overlooked for months. Nathan Brooks walked into the room without his security uniform, wearing an elegant charcoal suit while holding the same notebook he had once carried through the lobby each morning. Before anyone could speak, every member of the board of directors rose to their feet simultaneously. The chairman nearest the entrance stepped forward with a warm smile and extended his hand. "Welcome back, Mr. Brooks," he said respectfully. "We have been waiting for you." The room fell into complete silence. Olivia remained frozen beside her chair, unable to process what she had just witnessed. The quiet security guard she had dismissed, corrected, and barely acknowledged was now being welcomed by the highest leadership inside the company with unmistakable respect. Nathan accepted the chairman's handshake with quiet humility, before looking calmly around the room. His eyes briefly met Olivia's, not with anger or satisfaction, but with the same gentle composure he had shown every morning beside the front entrance. In that single moment, every ordinary interaction from the past several months returned to everyone's memory with breathtaking clarity. Silence settled across the executive boardroom, so completely that even the quiet hum of the ventilation system seemed unusually loud. Every executive remained standing, not because anyone had instructed them to do so, but because the board of directors had risen first. Nathan Brooks walked calmly toward the head of the conference table with the same measured pace he had used while greeting employees at the front entrance only minutes earlier. Nothing about his expression suggested triumph. There was no satisfaction in watching surprised faces, no trace of resentment, and certainly no desire to embarrass anyone. He simply placed his familiar leather notebook on the polished table before thanking the directors with a respectful nod. "Please," he said softly, "let us all have a seat." Chairs slowly slid across the hardwood floor as everyone returned to their places. Olivia Carter lowered herself into her chair almost mechanically, unable to look away from the man she had treated like an ordinary security guard for months. Nathan glanced around the room, making eye contact with every department leader before speaking again. "Many of you have spent the last several months preparing reports about productivity, revenue, customer satisfaction, and operational performance," he began. "Those numbers are important. They help us understand how our company performs in the marketplace. But they tell us almost nothing about who we become while achieving those results." Without raising his voice, Nathan pressed a small remote resting beside his notebook. A large screen at the front of the boardroom slowly illuminated. Instead of financial charts, a video recording appeared. The first clip showed Emily entering the lobby on her first day, struggling to carry presentation materials while Nathan quietly helped her without being asked. The next recording showed the catering assistant accidentally spilling supplies, before Nathan calmly assisted her while reassuring her that mistakes happen. Another clip revealed maintenance technicians working late in the evening as Nathan thanked each of them by name before wishing them a safe trip home. The room remained completely silent. Then the recordings changed. Olivia appeared on screen instructing Nathan to dispose of her coffee cup, without ever acknowledging him as a person. Another executive dismissed a delivery driver without making eye contact. A supervisor ignored a custodian requesting temporary elevator access, while continuing a personal phone conversation. None of the scenes involved shouting or dramatic conflict. They revealed something far more uncomfortable. Everyday choices. Ordinary moments. Simple opportunities to treat another human being with dignity. Nathan stopped the video and allowed several quiet seconds to pass. "Every camera inside this building exists to protect company property," he said calmly. "Over the past several months, they have also revealed something much more valuable. They have shown me the culture we created when nobody believed leadership was watching." No one interrupted him. Several executives lowered their eyes toward the conference table. Olivia remained motionless, remembering every interaction she had dismissed as insignificant. Nathan opened his notebook and gently turned several pages filled with handwritten observations. The purpose of this experience was never to catch anyone making mistakes, he continued. It was to answer one important question. If our employees treat the person they believe has the least authority with respect, they will almost certainly treat customers, partners, and one another the same way. But if dignity depends upon someone's job title, then our mission statement is only decoration on a wall. He looked toward Emily, who had been invited to attend the meeting as an observer without knowing why. She appeared both surprised and deeply moved. Nathan smiled warmly. One intern consistently greeted everyone she met by name, thanked our custodial team, helped a delivery driver without hesitation, and treated a security guard as though his time mattered. That behavior required no executive training. It simply reflected character. The compliment caused Emily to blush with quiet embarrassment. Nathan then turned his attention toward Olivia. His voice remained gentle. Leadership is never measured by how people treat those above them. Leadership is revealed by how they treat those they believe cannot change their future. Olivia slowly closed her eyes for a brief moment. For the first time in her distinguished career, she understood that the most important performance review she had ever received contained no numbers at all, only the silent reflection of her own everyday choices. No one spoke after Nathan's final sentence. The silence inside the boardroom felt different now. It no longer carried surprise. It carried reflection. Every executive remained seated, looking at the polished conference table, as though they could still see the ordinary moments that had quietly exposed their character. Nathan allowed the silence to breathe before closing his notebook. This meeting was never designed to embarrass anyone, he said gently. If humiliation could build great leaders, every failure would automatically produce wisdom. It does not. Growth begins only when people choose honesty over pride. He slowly walked away from the head of the table, removing the invisible distance that often separated founders from employees. Instead of standing above everyone, he stood beside the conference table like another colleague participating in an important conversation. Several members of the board asked why I insisted on wearing a security uniform, instead of announcing another culture initiative, Nathan continued. The answer is simple. Policies describe values. Everyday behavior proves whether those values actually exist. He looked toward the directors seated nearest the windows. A company never becomes exceptional because its executives write beautiful mission statements. It becomes exceptional because receptionists, technicians, managers, custodians, interns, and security officers all believe they deserve equal dignity. One of the senior vice presidents slowly raised his hand. Mr. Brooks, he said quietly, are people going to lose their jobs because of what we just watched? Nathan smiled with calm sincerity. If I wanted fear, I could have accomplished that with one email. Fear changes behavior for a few days. Understanding changes people for years. Several executives exchanged relieved yet thoughtful glances. Nathan walked toward the large windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Morning sunlight reflected across neighboring buildings while traffic flowed peacefully beneath the skyline. Every person inside this company has made mistakes, he said without turning around. Including me. Years ago, I became so focused on growth that I occasionally overlooked the people making that growth possible. I learned that lesson because someone had the courage to tell me the truth. Today I am offering all of you the same opportunity. He finally turned back toward the room. No one here is being judged by their worst moment. You are being invited to choose your next one more carefully. Olivia Carter slowly stood from her chair. Her confident posture remained, but her voice carried a humility nobody in the room had ever heard before. "Mr. Brooks," she began softly, "I owe you an apology. Not because you own this company, but because I stopped seeing the people around me as individuals deserving the same respect I expected for myself." Nathan listened without interruption. Olivia continued, choosing every word carefully. "I convinced myself that efficiency mattered more than kindness. I believed results excused impatience. Watching those recordings made me realize I was leading people to meet deadlines instead of helping them become better human beings." The room remained completely silent as she finished speaking. Nathan nodded gently. "Thank you for your honesty. That conversation required far more courage than pretending nothing happened." He looked around the room once more. Apologies have value only when they become habits. Emily quietly watched from the back of the room, amazed that the founder of a multibillion-dollar company had responded to months of disrespect without raising his voice or humiliating anyone in return. The lesson unfolding before her had nothing to do with corporate leadership alone. It was a lesson about character. Nathan opened a folder resting beside his notebook and handed copies to every executive. "Beginning today," he said warmly, "our leadership evaluations will include something new. Every manager will spend one full day each quarter working alongside employees whose jobs often go unnoticed. Security, custodial services, maintenance, reception, shipping. Not as supervisors. As teammates." Several board members smiled approvingly. Nathan closed the meeting with one final thought. Titles may earn authority, but only humility earns trust. From this day forward, Brooks Holdings will measure success not only by what we accomplish, but by how every person feels after crossing paths with one of our leaders. No applause followed. None was needed. The quiet determination filling the room carried far more weight than celebration ever could, and everyone understood that the true transformation of the company had only just begun. The weeks following the leadership meeting transformed Brooks Holdings in ways that no organizational chart or policy manual could fully explain. Employees still arrived each morning carrying laptops, coffee cups, and meeting agendas, but something subtle had begun changing beneath the familiar routines. People slowed down long enough to greet one another. Managers paused to thank maintenance teams repairing equipment before business hours. Receptionists found department directors asking about their families instead of rushing past the front desk. The atmosphere remained professional, yet it felt noticeably warmer, as though the building itself had quietly learned to breathe differently. Nathan Brooks returned to wearing simple business attire during board meetings, but he refused to occupy the largest executive office. Instead, he continued spending much of his day walking through departments, speaking with employees at every level of the company. Sometimes he joined software developers during brainstorming sessions. Other days he shared lunch with warehouse coordinators or customer service representatives. He asked thoughtful questions far more often than he delivered speeches, believing genuine leadership began with listening rather than instructing. Emily continued growing into one of the company's most promising young professionals. Although her internship had originally lasted only one semester, Nathan personally encouraged her to accept a full-time position after graduation. He never mentioned the boardroom meeting when they spoke. Instead, he challenged her to remain exactly the person she had been before anyone recognized her potential. "Never allow success to convince you that ordinary kindness has become unnecessary," he reminded her one afternoon while they walked through the headquarters lobby. Emily smiled warmly. "After everything that happened here, I do not think I could ever forget that lesson." Nathan nodded. "Good. Because companies remember policies for a few years. People remember how someone made them feel for a lifetime." Olivia Carter embraced the changes with quiet determination. She requested permission to spend her first leadership immersion day working alongside the custodial team responsible for maintaining the executive floors. Dressed in the same practical uniform as the rest of the crew, she spent an entire day cleaning conference rooms, preparing meeting spaces, and speaking with employees who normally finished their work long before executives arrived each morning. For the first time in years, she experienced how invisible many essential workers felt despite contributing enormously to the company's success. At the end of her shift, she personally thanked every member of the custodial team before leaving the building. Word of her attitude gradually spread throughout headquarters, not because anyone had been instructed to notice, but because authentic change always speaks more quietly than public announcements. Several months later, Brooks Holdings hosted a leadership conference attended by executives from businesses across the country. Many guests expected presentations focused on innovation, technology, and financial growth. Instead, Nathan opened the conference with a single photograph projected across the enormous auditorium screen. It showed a security guard holding a lobby door open for employees entering work on an ordinary autumn morning. No one in the audience recognized the man at first. Nathan smiled gently before speaking. Every remarkable organization is built upon thousands of ordinary moments, just like this one. The question is never how impressive our buildings become. The question is how people feel while walking through their doors. The audience listened with complete attention. Nathan shared stories about respect, humility, accountability, and service without ever mentioning individual mistakes or embarrassing anyone who had participated in the earlier evaluation. His message focused entirely on possibility rather than blame. After the conference concluded, visitors repeatedly commented that they had attended expecting business strategies, but left thinking about humanity instead. As evening settled across downtown Chicago, Nathan stood quietly outside the headquarters entrance, where he had once greeted employees each morning wearing a security uniform. The revolving doors continued opening and closing as people finished another productive day. Some paused to thank the evening security officer before heading home. Others greeted the custodial staff by name while leaving the building. Nathan watched those simple interactions with quiet satisfaction, before smiling toward the city lights reflecting across the glass walls. Lasting change had never depended upon revealing who owned the company. It had begun the moment people chose to recognize the value already present in those they had once overlooked, and Nathan understood that culture is never transformed by one unforgettable meeting alone. It is transformed every ordinary day afterward, one respectful choice at a time. Nearly 1 year passed, and the transformation inside Brooks Holdings had become impossible to ignore. Visitors often commented on the atmosphere before they ever discussed the company's products or financial performance. Receptionists greeted every guest with genuine warmth. Managers paused to thank delivery drivers before signing invoices. Executives knew the names of security officers, maintenance technicians, and cafeteria employees. The changes had never been announced through expensive advertising campaigns. They had grown quietly through thousands of ordinary decisions repeated every single day. Nathan Brooks preferred that outcome more than any business award displayed inside the headquarters lobby. One crisp spring morning, he arrived before sunrise carrying the same worn leather notebook that had accompanied him throughout the entire leadership evaluation. Instead of entering through the executive parking garage, he walked toward the employee entrance where a new security officer stood welcoming everyone with a friendly smile. The young officer immediately recognized Nathan and stood respectfully. Nathan smiled and gently shook his hand. "Please," he said warmly, "keep doing exactly what you were doing before I arrived." The officer relaxed and continued greeting employees as they entered the building. Nathan quietly stepped aside and watched. A senior accountant stopped to ask the officer how his young daughter was recovering after surgery. A maintenance supervisor handed him a fresh cup of coffee before beginning the morning inspection. Several employees thanked him for working through the previous night's heavy rain. None of them realized Nathan was observing the scene from only a few feet away. He opened his notebook and wrote just 3 words. "This is culture." Later that morning, Brooks Holdings hosted its annual employee recognition celebration inside the company auditorium. Unlike previous years, the event focused less on financial milestones and more on individuals whose daily actions strengthened the organization's values. Nathan sat among the audience, instead of occupying the front row reserved for senior leadership. Emily, now a respected project manager, stood on stage to introduce the first award recipient. She smiled toward hundreds of co-workers before speaking. "The greatest lesson I learned during my first year here was that every person deserves to be seen," she said. "Today we celebrate people who quietly make others feel valued every single day." The audience applauded as employees from every department received recognition, including security officers, custodial staff, receptionists, warehouse coordinators, and administrative assistants whose contributions had often gone unnoticed in years past. Olivia Carter presented one of the final awards herself. Her voice carried calm confidence, but now it also reflected humility and through experience. "Leadership begins long before someone receives a title," she said sincerely. "I learned that from someone who believed character mattered more than position." She looked toward Nathan with genuine gratitude before presenting the award to a longtime maintenance technician, whose dedication had quietly served the company for more than 2 decades. As the ceremony concluded, employees gathered throughout the lobby sharing conversations, laughter, and congratulations. Nathan walked slowly toward the front entrance, where sunlight poured through the tall glass windows exactly as it had on the first morning he wore a security uniform. The revolving doors continued turning. New applicants entered carrying resumes filled with hope. Delivery drivers completed another busy route. Clients arrived for meetings. Ordinary life continued. Emily joined Nathan near the entrance. "Do you ever miss wearing the security uniform?" she asked with a smile. Nathan looked toward the lobby where employees greeted one another naturally, without hesitation. He smiled softly before answering. The uniform was never important. What mattered was discovering whether people could recognize dignity before they recognized status. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Together they watched another employee pause to hold the door open for a visitor carrying several heavy boxes. The visitor thanked him warmly before continuing inside. Nathan closed his notebook for what would become the final time. There were no more observations to collect, because the lesson had already taken root. As he stepped outside into the bright spring morning, he glanced once toward the headquarters that had become stronger not because its profits had grown, but because its people had grown together. Some organizations become successful because they build remarkable products. The greatest organizations become unforgettable because they never forget the value of the people who quietly hold the door open for everyone else. Nathan walked peacefully toward the city sidewalk without seeking applause, fully aware that the strongest legacy is rarely announced. It is simply lived, one respectful moment at a time.